What if simply knowing a piece of information could put you at risk? In recent years, this idea has captured the internet's attention and imagination, leading to philosophical discussions and new levels of scary stories. Today, let's discuss the concept known as Infohazards. This is Red Web. Welcome back, Task Force 2, episode 200 of Red Web, the podcast all about unsolved mysteries, true crime, and the supernatural. It is my personal journey to explore the unknown and figure out, are ghosts real? Are aliens real? And what's going on the internet? I'm your resident mystery enthusiast, Trevor Collins, and joining me for his 200th episode with me, Alfredo Diaz.
200, the big old 200.
Man, if I had a nickel for every episode, I'd have...
We'd have... How much is that?
200 nickels.
200 nickels.
2 glasses of milk, please.
Which we would buy nothing. Maybe something from the dollar menu.
That's what I just did the math quickly. Anyway...
yeah, episode 200 is it's a good feeling. Thank you, Task Force, for everything. This is the episode where people look back 10 years from now, and the Task Force is a giant conglomerate, and people will go, the Task Force Rebellion saga will start, and people will go, I miss the good old days. I miss episode 200 and below.
Right. I can feel that nostalgia coming. They're going to ask questions commonly like, where were you at the decision of episode 200? Which side of the Civil War did you land on?
Yeah.
You know, we don't know the inciting incident yet. You know, this hasn't launched. We're recording this ahead of time. These are not live. So we'll just have to figure out which side we land on.
It probably comes with the demise of Christian, and then from there the resurrection through AI.
Oh,
kind of nice.
And well, don't forget the ghouls. There's always ghouls.
There's definitely some ghouls.
I don't know what side they're on. I'm on the other side.
What a tangent!
It is 200 episodes deep. We're now fully independent. Our phoenix wings have stretched wide. We've floated around this planet a couple times now, just in this independent form. But yeah, 200 episodes. It's wild. It's wild to look back, genuinely, on all of the episodes and topics we've covered. Today is no different. This one harkens back all the way to episode 1. It is our bread and butter. It's the internet. It is so intriguing to me, and it's what we always call, it's the next frontier of mysteries, where new stories unfold, new ideas are discussed, and the virality of it all is just so fascinating. So I felt like this is something that I've been wanting to talk about for quite some time. It is my Holy Roman Empire, Infohazards, just this entire concept of Infohazards. Have you ever heard of that term, by the way?
I think very vaguely once, but is it simply just info, you know too much?
I mean, very simply, yeah, essentially that concept. And of course, we'll walk you into the etymology, like where this came from, what it means, all the different subdivisions of Infohazards. And then, of course, at the back end, instead of theorizing, we're going to give you hands-on examples of some common ones that I'm sure you, Fredo, know about, but also the task force might kind of recognize. And then one that you might not have heard about that I've been wanting to talk about for years now. Christian can attest to that. I've just kept it on the docks for a minute now.
Whoa. So info that I shouldn't be knowing, I will now know.
You will now know.
Okay.
And you will then be at risk, whatever that risk is.
Yep.
And that is the sensitive topic of today, is that we're talking about Infohazards.
Like, it's just hazards all over the place, so it's okay.
That's true. We do work in a task force HQ that's subterranean, constantly remodeling. We got upturned boards with exposed nails in them. You know? Hazards all over this place.
Lots of physical hazards, but you did sign the safety warning, so you're locked in.
Right. We did zap your memory of you signing it, but you did sign it. Just trust. Now, speaking of the task force, I want to give a huge shout out to our Patreon members over at patreon.com/redweb. It is the best way to support us. You get this podcast ad-free. You get exclusive Discord events. You have access to our exclusive podcast movie club, all sorts of bonus behind-the-scenes stuff. Just a lot of things to thank you for supporting us directly. And some shout outs from the task force include Sarah Jade 86. We got Noah True. And then, of course, our elite squonks coming out of the swamps, Bewick, Broman, G, Zarathustra, to name a few. Thank you guys so much. And if you want to get your gear going, as we go into the chillier days, we got merch. store.redwebpod.com. I have said the URL wrong before, but now I've rewritten the post-it note, and it is correct. We're all good now.
We're all good. We're locked in. Get yourself something nice. Rep the task force. I'd like to think that everyone that you named is living like just little luxuries at Task Force HQ. Like pens that don't wear out of ink. You know what I mean?
Oh my God. Infinite ink?
Yeah.
Yeah. A cup that never runs out, A sippy mug that it's bottomless.
Full of knowledge.
Yeah. And you actually get an extra square foot too.
Of height or like room space?
You could do whatever you want with that. You can increase the ceiling height.
You can place that wherever you want.
You could put a coat rack in it.
Just be careful.
All right. Let's take you now into my mind. This is the kind of stuff that I tumble down the rabbit hole on a late Saturday night, just by myself, reading on the internet. Let's talk about Infohazards. Now, the term information hazard or infohazard was introduced back in 2011, so it's a relatively new term. And it was introduced by philosopher Nick Bostrom in his paper entitled Information Hazards, a Typology of Potential Harms from Knowledge. So you can find a link to his paper in the description wherever you listen to this podcast. It is where essentially all this information comes from because it is his concept, except for maybe the examples. Those come from the broader internet. But yeah, if you want to get into the very nitty-gritty, all the weeds, all the subgenres of infohazards, again, that paper is in the description. Now, Bostrom himself defines infohazards as, quote, a risk that arises from the dissemination or potential dissemination of true information that may cause harm or enable some agent to cause harm, end quote. So in other terms, it's the concept that a piece of information can pose a risk simply by being known or shared.
Yeah, I mean, look, information it can be a powerful thing. And you watch, just governments in general, right? Real life, or you experience it through movies. People will kill for knowledge.
That's what they say, right? Knowledge is power.
Knowledge is power.
And sometimes power, it hurts a little bit. So this harm that he refers to doesn't have to be physical harm. It takes a lot of different forms. Physical, of course, but psychological and even existential harm. We'll get to an example that kind of explores that. But I want to give some broad strokes examples before we continue on, because it does start to get a little in the weeds. A lot of details, a lot of kind of confusion. So misinformation, false or misleading information, I should say, can cause harm if believed or acted upon, right?
Oh, yeah. People have told great lies too. Mm-hmm. Cults. Look at cults.
Sure.
They're just feeding
Absolutely.
people BS all the time, and look how powerful that could be.
Right. Misinformation can cause harm in all sorts of different ways. You have sensitive data. If disclosed, right, through like an NDA breach or what have you, or a security breach, privacy violation, whatever.
Oh, God, all the social
Sensitive
securities that got leaked recently.
Oh,
no!
Well, everybody go ahead and freeze your credit score unless you're not American, then go ahead and chuckle a little bit, but then allow us to all freeze our credits.
Yeah, just...
That's a serious thing.
Yeah, on a serious note, just make sure to check your credit score often. Nowadays, you're pretty protected. It's more just a big nuisance. But yeah, 2.7 billion.
Golly. Wait, serious? Hold on a second.
Yeah.
There aren't 2.7 billion Americans.
Well, they also count UK has Social Security too.
Oh, but that's an old country, so they're like 1, 2, and 3. So those are guessable.
That would suck if you had one and it got leaked and you got to get another one.
Oh man, I had a really good number that I parked.
Great number.
All right, so there's also like dangerous knowledge, which is information that could enable harmful actions, such as details on creating weapons or exploiting vulnerabilities. And then psychological harm can come in the form of information that causes distress, anxiety, panic. In this podcast, we list sensitive topics whenever those are applicable because of this very concept, right?
Yep.
But in addition to those types of harm, infohazard harm can also be more innocuous. We were talking before we recorded this episode about the recent release of Alien Romulus, and the reason I mention that is movie spoilers can come in the form of an infohazard. If you know the ending of a movie, it may negatively impact your kind of experience of the film, but you're not necessarily harmed, so to speak.
Right.
But, it does... It is a negative thing, right?
It still sucks. During pre-release of Avengers Endgame, I went internet silent for about a week and a half.
Yep.
We did have a colleague that was spoiled.
I hate that for them.
They read a message from Reddit and it's like, this person dies and that person and this person dies. And they're like, oh, great.
Well, since it's been about 62 years, what was that spoiler?
You want to know?
Yeah, I want to know what that spoiler was.
Oh, the spoiler literally was like Gamora dies, Red Skull's in it.
Oh,
like,
it's the death list?
Yeah, the death list.
Oh, man. So that was Infinity War then, right?
Yeah.
Part 1?
No, it was Endgame.
Was it? Oh, I
Yeah.
see. The big ones. Yeah.
The big ones. Gamora,
big
Tony
ones.
Stark. I was like, damn, that's unfortunate.
While we're on the topic, and because this is a deep well of conversation, maybe best suited for movie club, but some do say, and I can feel some task force members kind of raising their hand, some argue the opposite, right? Some studies have shown that spoilers can actually enhance the ending of a movie, but of course that means somebody who wanted the spoiler, like they went out of their way to go find fan theories of that nature. And even then, it's still arguable at best. It's not a foolproof concept, but it is interesting to me that sometimes, or some studies have shown, if you know where it's going, it actually enhances your appreciation. But to each their own. Everybody's got a different take, right?
Yeah, I could see that. I think that kind of spins into like movie trailers as well, right? The trailers show everything these days. But then again, it's like, okay, for instance, Romulus. I'm like, okay, that spoiled a lot. But here's the thing. I'm a big, huge Xenomorph fan, so I'm going to watch it anyways. They're not trying to hook me. They're trying to hook the people that are like on the fence or don't care about it and go, hey, look at all these cool scenes.
Absolutely. I mean, there are movies that I choose to go in 100% uninformed. Like, I know it exists. I think Rogue One, Star Wars Rogue One was an example of that. Longlegs, I tried my best to know as little as possible in recent memory. But then there's other movies like odds and ends Marvel movies, maybe not the big ones like the Avengers movies. I will indulge in fan theories like New Rockstars nonstop. Just because I'm like, I love that world, but I'm not super informed on a lot of different nuanced stories.
Yeah, great channel.
And to me, I've still been fine both ways. But again, to each their own. I just love movies. But spoilers are, interestingly, a softer form of Infohazard. So Bostrom goes on to categorize the many different subtypes of Infohazards by, in one category, effect, but also in a way that he calls, quote, information transfer mode, end quote. And so I have a graph for you from his paper that it's the typology of information hazards, as he calls it. It's a visual breakdown of how he does it, but I just wanted you to see just how many subcategories there are. Of course, this will post on social and on YouTube for the task force members looking to access it. It's also in his paper in the description.
Oh, data hazard, idea hazard, attention hazard, effects type, subtype, enemy information, asymmetry hazard. Oh yeah, this kind of like breaks off in branches.
Yeah. So the top half, those 6 that you just read, those ones are basically how information is transferred, and the by effect is kind of in the name. It's broken down into ways that it affects things and what it affects. Let me break it down actually with more detail. So the effect category, they're pretty straightforward. You have things like adversarial risks, things like breaking an NDA and releasing intellectual property to a competitor. Could be something even higher, could be government to government adversary, things that are just of that ilk, right?
Yeah.
You have risks to society, information that could change social structures or the market, or basically just how society is built. You also have risks, importantly, right, it's a very topical one, from information technology. Concerns around artificial intelligence are very top of mind right now, and it categorizes that as its own kind of thing. And those are just a few of those effect-driven categories.
Artificial intelligence is such a hard topic, but I do feel like it has its place in the world where it can be very beneficial for health, for learning. It's just, how do you heavily regulate that? You know what I mean? And do you?
Oh, yeah.
Like, man, it's
very
rough. I do feel like it will be a heavy part of our future, and that at some point, most of the negative ideology around it will flip, because I feel like once it finds its groove in everyday casual assistance for a human being, then that's when the masses go, actually,
Right.
hold on, I like my little AI thing that helps me do everything.
Absolutely. And then the next generation that's born with it, they'll never know a world without it.
That's true.
And so they'll know to accept it. And so there's a kind of fine line to find as a society. I think we all are still looking for it, and everyone has different opinions. But one thing that really aggravates me about AI is that it's used to supplant creators, artists, musicians, anybody that creates. It's used to supplant those people by studying their work. It studies their work, emulates it, and then tries to replace them with their stolen work. That is so weird and so unethical.
It's used in a weird, nefarious way right now.
And it's just dumping so much crap on the internet. I've seen so many videos on like, this is how I get rich quick. False, by the way, just pure false. Not gonna happen.
Nope.
Where they just use it to dump articles out that are just based on other articles with no fact checking. And so the internet, my fear on one polar end is that we're just gonna be littered with trash all over the internet, and then AI is gonna consume that trash and it's gonna spiral off into just this realm of garbage.
Yeah, I think it's like a descent, right? Like the internet came about and it was so easy to get information, and now the information people are just kind of regurgitating from one another, and we use, you Google, and now the AI searches at the top, and a lot of times it's not even like right. And so,
oh my god, it's wrong so often. Like, have you seen the guy that it said, yeah, if your pepperoni's falling off your pizza, just use some Elmer's glue? What? Where is this coming from? Oh right, it's scrubbing Reddit where people joke and it doesn't understand humor. I mean, listen, that's the more cynical side. On the other end of the spectrum, there is the positive side. I think you're right. This is definitely a tool that could increase efficiency, increase quality of life, and help humans improve, right? There are like ways that AI can rapidly analyze viruses and genomes to find cures for things, and that's still kind of in the works. There are positives that it can help with, and if you want it as an assistant on your phone, that is also kind of cool, but it's just so interesting that it's a double-edged sword, literally.
Yeah, I think the issue right now is that it's in the hands of like greedy corporations. And so they're just like, how can we monetize the hell out of this?
Right.
How can we squeeze larger profit margins? And it's at the expense of, the people you've listed.
Yeah,
man,
absolutely.
Let me tell you, I do voice acting work in addition to Red Web, and that AI is such a huge concern. Every single gig that I get, that has to be part of the negotiation where you have to say, okay, are you willing to, what's your stance on this? And can we fix this into the contract? It is exhausting.
Oof.
Yeah.
So that's just like, I don't even do it full time, but just dealing with it firsthand, it is exhausting.
Hey, Christian, can I get you to say, my name is Christian Young?
Why? Can I ask why real quick?
Just give me clear and airwaves. Can I go ahead and get that?
Yeah, can you just tell me why first of all?
Oh, that's such a funny joke. Christian, why do you keep laughing? That's so weird.
You just tell me why first? Jesus Christ.
Anyway, I'm not going to clone that voice or anything.
That's so good.
No, Christian, you have a great voice. I'm really stoked to hear that you're doing some voice acting work, but also I totally see that happening. Is like people cloning voices and then making their voice available like beyond their actual reach, right? And anyway, this is like a whole kind of nuanced topic within Infohazards, and I know it's a hot button topic for a lot of people. I'm not trying to get anyone enraged, but this is a real conversation I think we all need to figure out together, because we're gonna have to find that path through these woods, to figure out what is ethical, what's moral, what's right, what's necessary, because it is a tool. It ain't going anywhere.
No, it's here to stay.
Yeah. And it does feel like a .com bubble era style thing where everyone's looking for an AI, and eventually a few of them will pan out, and then we'll stop being so focused on it maybe. I don't know. I'm not super well informed on it, admittedly. I think it's an interesting topic. I'm not like a philosopher on the topic or a teacher, or I just don't muse on it a lot. But we're going to fall somewhere on that cynical to positive spectrum, and I hope that it's somewhere that we can all be comfortable with, and it becomes a tool, right? Because you can't really replace it. Anyway, this is going to be a very interesting topic to look back on when we get to the big example. I'm very excited to get to that, because this lays that groundwork nicely. But coming back to kind of the categorization, we talked about some of the effect categories, but the one I'm more interested in is the one that he refers to as an information transfer mode. Again, this typology is more focused on the way in which information is communicated or shared, which can affect then the potential harm it might cause. And then some examples of those include data hazards. Data and information can be harmful even if it's true and factual. For example, I talked about genomes, right? The genome for smallpox, Ebola, and other deadly diseases are actually public domain. At least from like the 90s is when smallpox was made publicly available. And someone knowing that information could use it for harmful purposes, just using data hazard as an example. Idea hazard is another transfer mode. Pause me if this doesn't make sense.
Okay.
This might be, I read the article too much and then I poured over this and now I got a blind spot. So this type of info hazard involves ideas that can lead to harmful consequences if believed or acted upon. For example, here, we just discussed the idea, right, that one could theoretically, with these public domain diseases, maybe they could theoretically synthesize a virus and make it even worse with different capabilities. A data hazard, very simply, when pointed out, can become an idea hazard, which then leads to our next example called an attention hazard. Stop me if you're getting a little lost.
Will do.
Okay, so basically these are just ways that ideas transfer, the different ways, right? Data is just, it's publicly available, and that's the transfer kind of version. Idea is basically somebody has an idea and says it, and now you know about it, and so that information has now passed to you in that sense. And an attention hazard is basically saying something very similar. This states that bringing attention to certain data or an idea then creates risk. So Bostrom has an example about a government body, right? Let's say they are focusing their concerns on biological warfare. Well, this may then signal to potential enemies that this is a concern that can be exploited, therefore seeding the idea. Essentially, their attention creates awareness, and then that manifests the thing that they were trying to avoid in the first place.
Okay.
So transfer modes are basically just how ideas transfer and then the risks involved there. It's a little bit more hairy. There are 3 different types of hazards. I don't want to get too in the weeds on the definitions because I think the examples that we're about to explore will help kind of materialize what I'm talking about. This episode of Red Web is sponsored by you guys, the task force. This is one of those opportunities where I just wanted to say thank you all so much for supporting the show, specifically at patreon.com/redweb. Kind of like PBS. This is an ad brought to you by you. And there are a lot of different ways you can support Red Web. We talk about it all the time in the proper show, but here in this little special ad break, I felt like I wanted to expand upon it a little bit. What is Patreon? What do you get with Patreon? As well as, of course, supporting with merch, the store.redwebpod.com domain. You can also share the show for free. You can review us wherever you listen to us. All of that means the world to us. It supports us in so many different ways, but Patreon is our bread and butter. It is where we built our community even tighter. We have exclusive Discord access where our community theorizes together and talks together. They suggest movies to watch as well as cases to cover in the proper show. We also have Movie Club, and I really want to dive into what Movie Club is because we've talked about it a few times, and I have a clip for you that I want to play because I want you to hear exactly what the vibe is. But we talk about horror movies. We break down the plot, give our thoughts, and have a lot of laughs along the way. So it's basically like Red Web, but exploring horror movies. And it is a great time. Otherwise, you also get this podcast entirely ad-free, so you won't hear these little ad breaks in the middle. And we also have all sorts of other bonus stuff like looks behind the scenes. In September, on the 25th, we're going to use the Randonautica app, which is an app we've covered in the past, and we're so excited to finally go film that, and it's going to go up exclusively for Patreon members. We've uploaded sneak peeks, behind the scenes, things that haven't released before. We had a Mothman commercial that came out, which was absolutely hilarious. Then, of course, we have Discord events every single month. With that said, here is a clip from a recent movie club.
Why does he kind of sound like Steve-O in the second half of the movie? Anybody notice that? Why does Houston sound like Steve-O?
Wait, he keeps talking? I don't remember him talking the rest of the movie.
When he's all scared and yelling, it's like Steve-O, and I couldn't take it seriously because it sounded like
Oh my god.
I was watching Jackass.
Remember him talking?
Go.
I'm Houston. Welcome to Jackass.
We're gonna die.
Yeah.
So to start, let's go with smaller examples, a little bit more innocuous info hazards. The Game. By the way, you just lost it. If you haven't heard of The Game, it's a theoretical mind game that everyone on Earth is playing.
What?
However, once you become aware of it, you lose. Wait a minute. Pause the record scratch. How have you How have you not heard of the game?
The game? I don't.
You've been on the internet since at least 1765.
At least. Well, I don't know,
Yeah.
man. What kind of game is this? Like a Triple H? The game? Like, I don't. I don't know, man. What kind of game are we talking about here, bro?
that was a
throwback,
good
right?
cut. I love that one. Okay. So my definition written here in my own script is based on maybe you knowing this. Okay, so let me break it down more. So the game is just a hypothetical game that was invented when I was a kid. And the whole idea was that if you think of the game, capital T, capital G, you lose, period, end of day. And when you lose the game, you have to announce it. You have to say out loud, "Oh man, I just lost the game." Then everyone around you moans because that means they thought of the game and now they lost, right? And so it becomes this ripple effect. And then when the internet took off, you'd see people randomly tweet things like, "Oh, I just lost the game." And then everyone responds. So it's like, it's this fake little viral game that then made it onto the internet, and it's just kind of stayed alive. And it's slowly petered out over the many years until someone like me sticks it in a podcast, and now, thousands of people just lost the game.
I've never heard of that.
That's amazing.
Also kind of bummed that I lost now.
I know. I just ruined your, however you old, let's see, 457?
Yeah.
Yep, your 457-year streak.
Yeah. It's a long
Yeah,
time.
Christian, it's 200 episodes in. It's time to tell you, Fredo is a cryptid.
Yeah.
I had a suspicion for a
Does it
good
finally
long
make
while.
sense?
Does it make sense?
Does it make sense now?
But yeah, that is an example of an info hazard. It doesn't cause any harm. It may cause some mild distress, as you can feel, but that is a simple example. And from there, I kind of wanted to spiral outward into online viral challenges. This is something that Christian actually brought up in the outline as a great example. You've heard of viral challenges like the Cinnamon Challenge or the Tide Pod Challenge.
Oh, God.
Huge preface,
Yeah.
don't do these. I'm telling you right now, do not.
Wasn't there
These are
like I don't know if this is real or not. Wasn't it TikTok? They got crazy and they started mixing alcohol in like a toilet bowl and stuff.
Oh man, are they making prison wine?
Yeah.
If my definition of that is understood.
I think so, yeah.
I don't know, dude. There was all sorts of yucky fermenting activity when I was in high school that was hitting the news. And then my parents would be like, "You're not doing this, are you?" I'm like, what are you asking me this for? First of all, now I know about it.
Right.
Second of all, God, no. I'm not sucking fermented air from just things, okay? I'll just say things. But no, so these challenges in particular, including many other viral challenges, they're dangerous, toxic activities where folks film themselves either eating too much cinnamon, then they either like cough or what have you, it's gonna burn their tongue, or something they shouldn't, like a Tide Pod. Just, okay. It then creates a viral feedback loop, causing others to jump in on the trend despite the dangers it poses to their health. And to ground it in what I've talked about, this is a great example of an idea hazard and actually what's called an evocation hazard. It's another transfer mode. Basically, sharing or promoting a challenge evokes a behavior that is extremely risky. And the idea is the challenge itself, right?
Right.
Another small info hazard example is something that I feel like our parents' generation is kind of into. The example being emails that say something like, "Forward this message to 10 people or you'll have bad luck for 10 years," right?
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, well, I don't want bad luck. I guess I'll forward it to Papa and Mama and
Yep.
my 8 siblings I don't have.
Bro, that just dates people so hard.
Yeah. And now this is a good example of an attention hazard because you are raising an awareness of this email and then it seeds the idea of like, well, if you don't do this, it plays off your, superstitions, your beliefs.
Right. If
you don't do it, you're going to have bad luck. So you better spread this potentially misinformation, or sometimes it's just no information. Now, one that's more interesting and starts to take more of an actual real world potential harm kind of feel to it is the placebo effect, right? Speaking of evocation hazards, the placebo effect could also be considered an info hazard. Placebos are medications with no therapeutic effects intended. They're used in clinical trials to act as a controlled variable so they can assess like a new medication against a sugar pill. Now, if someone is taking a placebo, but they believe it is the real medication, they may actually start to experience the anticipated effects. Though, if they become aware that it's a placebo, those effects may then go away. This is very much a hypersimplification of psychosomatic symptoms, because their mind believes it so strongly that even if it's a sugar pill, it might manifest real-world results. And usually it's not harmful, but it could be, right? We're entering that realm.
I'm very aware of this because Bugs Bunny taught me this in Space Jam.
Oh, please, let's break it down.
When he was with Michael Jordan and the other Looney Tunes, and they were against the Monstars.
Oh my God, that was scary.
They were getting absolutely demolished.
Yeah,
And
I remember.
Bugs Bunny brought out a Gatorade bottle and wrote secret stuff. And was like, he was like, Michael, you're holding out on us with the secret stuff. And Michael Jordan was like, what are you talking about? And Bugs Bunny was like, wink, wink. And then all the tunes drank it. And everyone was like, yeah, we got the secret juice. Since you poured it out, we got this. And then it was just water.
Oh, what?
Yeah,
He didn't have any secret stuff?
There was no secret stuff. It's just water.
Dude.
But that's placebo. So at a very young age, I was like, hey, that's a placebo effect.
No, for sure, though. That is exactly like a really good example of the placebo effect, right? But basically, this is an information hazard because the information about the medicine evokes a real-world effect by way of a person's belief and expectation of the treatment, regardless of its presence or not in the medicine that they're taking, right? So those are like some smaller examples that you can kind of relate to take this more nebulous concept and ground it into something that you're familiar with. And then this leads me to my Holy Roman Empire, my Trojan horse for this entire topic, this whole podcast. It's what's called Roko's Basilisk. It's a thought experiment. Have you ever heard of Roko's Basilisk?
No.
Nah, I bet not. Christian, have you heard of it other than me telling you about it about a dozen times?
You are the only person I've ever heard mention this before.
Great, now I sound like a mad person.
Like an absolute madman.
Everybody out there's shaking their head. No, I've never heard of this. I just had a lucid dream and then it came to me and it's actually not real. Well, okay, so this is a really, really interesting concept and I feel like I could do a 20-minute, speech about it and hop up on a pedestal and just go for it, in a town square with nobody there. But I'll break it down a lot more simply. It's a thought experiment. Like I said, I've heard it referred to as many different things: Roko's Basilisk, Rocco's Basilisk, etc. But it's perhaps one of the most infamous info hazards. So on July 23rd, 2010, so it actually precedes the year that info hazards were coined, there was a user named Roko, R-O-K-O, and they shared their thought experiment on the Less Wrong forums. This is a forum for discussing philosophical ideas, to put it briefly. Now, in this experiment, if it were real, you hearing about it would actually put you at risk for existential or perhaps physical harm, theoretically. We've discussed how a piece of information can pose a risk simply by being known, and that is a core part of this idea.
Uh-oh.
So are you ready to proceed? I got to get some verbal nods.
Yes.
Okay. Christian? A laugh is a yes.
How did you do that so quickly?
There's someone in the task force is like, off, turn it off.
I'll give you a beat. I'll give you a pause. Hit play on your favorite Hoobastank CD to kind of numb out drown out the basilisk.
Hoobastank.
How do they have more than one CD?
I don't know.
Okay, so your favorite CD might be their CD, but anyway, okay, so here's the concept. In this scenario, let's say there's an extremely advanced artificial intelligence that exists somewhere in the far future. This otherwise benevolent and omniscient superintelligence has the ability to simulate reality. It can calculate everything that has happened, anything that can happen, very Westworld before it was canceled. The argument suggests that if you were aware, like somehow knew that this AI could exist at some point in the future, and you didn't do anything to assist in its creation or arrival, the AI would then punish you and perhaps torture you for all eternity in its virtual reality. In other words, this potential AI is attempting to blackmail you into assisting with its development and creation. So let me ask you, now that you're aware of this potential theoretical AI, would you feel compelled to help create it or at least advocate for its invention?
Probably not.
Probably is doing a lot of work there.
It's doing a lot of work. I don't think I would.
It's a very interesting concept that makes a lot of logical assumptions about morals and ethics and artificial intelligence, but it's such a fascinating concept.
It's very difficult either way.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you stand on this?
So that's a great question. I've decided to not answer. This reminds me of the short story, I Have No Mouth, But I Must Scream. And it is an exploration of this kind of topic. It is an advanced AI, but it is manifest, right? It has a physical presence in the world. It is taken over, and it has like 5 humans as its plaything, and it's able to keep them alive for forever and kind of torture them in various ways. It's very dark. It's a classic, but it gets very dark and very interesting. And so that's what this concept is kind of leaning on, is that if you sat here and tweeted, I don't want a self-aware AI to ever exist, it then might grab that. Regardless of what you do, it's like, well, you were on the other side, right?
Yeah.
It's the Terminator of it all. On Judgment Day, this AI arrives and it carves out half of the humanity or whatever that was like not helping it, not either trying to invent it, not advocating for it, what have you. And then it says, all right, you're my playthings for forever. I think there are, again, some logical fallacies in play that give me comfort to say, no, I don't think I would. But there's also reasonable fear anybody could have as a human being for wanting a self-aware AI. And especially if it's going to take this form, if it's going to be this kind of reductive and vindictive, then like you're leaving a lot of people no choice but to be like, I don't know. I don't want that.
Yeah.
It's a very difficult question to answer.
Yeah.
But I want to give it in a different way.
Okay.
It's not the same concept, but it's very similar. Some folks have kind of considered it to be the modern version of what's called Pascal's wager. It's another thought experiment that could be considered an info hazard. So this one gets a little religious. I'm not pressing religion on anybody. I'm literally exploring this same concept that Blaise Pascal has put forth many, many centuries ago. He was a philosopher, mathematician, many other things of the 17th century, and he argued that human beings should live their lives as if God exists, even if it cannot be proven or logically made sound. Distilling this down very briefly, it says that if God exists, a believer gains the infinite reward of heaven. If God doesn't exist, a believer kind of loses very little. On the other hand, if they don't believe, and he does exist, they gain an infinite punishment, hell. And if he doesn't exist, they gain little, other than maybe being right.
One could argue that you do lose a lot, though, right? Like if you
I think
go to, you lose time.
I would 100% agree.
Very little time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. You're spending how much time praying? Spending how much time at mass? Not to get super into religion or anything like that, but I feel like there is a loss of time. I think that time is valuable for humans.
Sure.
It seems like we have forever until we don't.
Right. 100%. And I'm not like, we're not trying to impress upon anyone's religious ideology out there.
No, not at
But
all.
like,
But I think it's very interesting.
It's super interesting. I love this kind of thinking. It's why I took a lot of like philosophy courses on the side back in college, because having logical arguments, you feel, especially as a novice student, you're like, oh wow, I'm trapped by this argument. But then you realize much smarter people than I have a new layer of the argument. And so when you explore those arguments, you go, oh no, now I'm trapped on the opposite side of this argument. And so it's so cool to explore these things because there really isn't an answer. That's what's so cool about philosophy.
Because I think like baseline, just surface level, I completely agree with, what you're saying, where I'm just like, well, yeah, right. What do you have to lose? And if you go further into it, you can find reasons of, things you lose like time.
Right.
But ultimately, surface level. Hey, you could even argue you live a better life or something like that because these beliefs could, some of the beliefs is like be kind to your neighbors and all that kind of stuff. Obviously, you can get into the weeds with Bibles and it's very bad stuff, but you know what I mean? So like, you could say, oh, I live a better quality life. It's an argument that someone could have. And then it's like, if not, if like God exists, then I'm good. If not, then I live a certain way.
Right. And that's kind of where I landed when I was a young buck, just hanging out,
just a
looking
young
at the
buck.
ceiling, when I was just a young baby deer. And or what's a buck? I don't know. And I'm just thinking about life. You know, you think about these kind of things. I feel like everyone does to some degree, and everybody makes their own decisions. And I'm like, listen, I'm just going to live the most joyous, positive, but like kind life I can live, right? I don't want to negatively impact others, but I also, you know, want to chase interests and learn about things and explore what it is to be human. Because regardless of what's on the other side of this corporeal veil, when we all pass on, if there's nothing or there's something, what we have here, in my humble opinion, what we have in this physical, chemical reality is so compelling. Now we go back, and now I'm just starting to think about Matrix theory and like, is this a simulation, you know? But like, it's so cool and so rare. I love the fact that humans have even invented philosophy to explore our reality in cerebral ways. Just, I don't know. Again, there are no answers. And again, I reiterate, I don't want to impress upon anybody or make anyone feel uncomfortable, but these topics are so fascinating to me just because it's the same cog that motivates my love of mysteries. The unknown is just so cool. And, you know, what could be, what is, let's analyze facts, let's analyze feelings, whatever. But this is like the pinnacle, like to me, of what's unknown. Roko's Basilisk, this Pascal's wager, the idea of Infohazards and how they can manifest in reality, but also in the mind. It's all so very interesting.
I feel like a philosophy class I would love it, but I would also hate it all at the same time. I would love the discussion. And then on top of that, I would discuss it with others, but then also discuss it in my own head and reverse engineer it. And then I get just really upset.
Yeah. Well, that's when you start to intellectualize feelings. And that's a rabbit hole in and of itself and can spiral off into negativity. But yeah, philosophy, really cool stuff. But yeah, even in Philosophy 101, people were crying. Some revelations, some questions, some brevity, some curtness by the professor. It is what it is sometimes, but that's what it can do. It can get you to the core of some of those human emotions, for better or worse. Now, before we wrap up, actually, before we move on, Christian, I'm very curious to hear maybe your take on Roko's Basilisk. And I feel like it's unfair for me to give a non-answer. So I would err on the side of not really, but I'm also playing it by ear. I wouldn't just kind of blindly lead to the arrival of a super smart but vindictive AI. I feel like I would assess along the way because that's how I approach anything. But how do you feel?
I'm kind of in the same boat. I feel like it is a bit, what's the word? Bit of a doomsday mindset to jump to that worst case scenario of, this vindictive, manipulative, evil AI. I think it's something I would, exactly like you're saying, kind of play it by ear and see and kind of watch from the sidelines and observe. But it's interesting. It's so interesting.
Right. Would I actively hinder? I don't think that I would just blindly do that either. It's the same conversation we go back to. This is kind of talking about what's now known as AGI, whereas AI has co-opted the term of like large language models and art generation. It isn't actually what we've known AI to be. So there's a spectrum. There are elements to it that I find disagreeable. Then there are elements to it that I find, that could definitely help humanity as a whole. And so I don't think there is a binary yes or no answer here, but it's almost the same as my own little baby brain philosophy on like religion when I was a kid. It was like, well, if I live the best life I can and I'm as good as I can be, whether I believe or not, I would hope that whatever power that is can recognize that, because there are many different gods. It's hard to say like which direction to go. So let me just live an ethical life and not wrong others, but also live a curious life. And then at the end of it, if there's something to judge me there, I hope I pass,
I think that's a great way to look at it. That's how I would want to live.
Yeah.
Just don't be an ass.
Just don't, okay? Just don't.
Just try to
We've covered many assholes on this podcast.
Yeah, we have. Oh god, I just hope it's not something like The Good Place, where it's a show about like heaven, hell, whatnot, and essentially it's just like everyone ends up going to the bad place just because like the ripple effect of like, oh, I got organic coffee, but then the organic coffee, it's like the ripple effect that somewhere down that chain it was something bad,
right?
Or I helped save this life, but that rippled into something else bad happening to someone else, and so ultimately like everyone It has a rap sheet.
Yep, everything is like, it's like the 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon, right? So everything is a couple degrees away from evil. And so you're trapped in a web that you just cannot make it to the good place. Oh, such an incredible show.
It's a great show.
With such thoughtful, speak of philosophy, such thoughtful exploration of some of those concepts while also being tastefully humorous. Oh my God, it's so good.
Yeah, it's great.
I would love to say more, but I feel like, I don't want to spoil something that good. But before we wrap up, I would be remiss if we didn't mention the most commonly known kinds of infohazards are actually fictional. This isn't something that can broadly plague the mind or something to be feared. In other words, there are, like, for example, SCP writers who use infohazards as a narrative device. We did a whole Case Files episode in the before times where we explored a handful of SCP anomalies. The one we're about to discuss was actually one explored there. But SCPs are a fictional task force. It's called the SCP Foundation. It's a fictional task force that, quote, secure, contain, and protect the world from existential threats, strange phenomenon, monsters, all sorts of really cool stuff. So if you like mysteries, you like the unsolved, this is just another way to explore that in a more fictionalized setting. There is an article known as SCP-2718 by Michael Atreus, who throughout the article repeatedly tells you to close the article and delete your cache because supposedly knowing about this particular entity, whatever is contained on the website, just by knowing about it can put you at risk, right? Very much like an info hazard.
Yep.
So finding the page means that it is not perfectly contained. Therefore, stop further reading, get out of here, save yourself, because once you get down the rabbit hole, you cannot turn back. It says things like belief is key, and that plays into some of the themes we've explored today. It's a lot of fun flavor text. I don't want to spoil it itself. If this is something that you're interested in, Task Force, go read it, explore the story. In fact, this is what Jillian says in the outline. She says, quote, I won't spoil it for you, but it gives the viewer the knowledge they shouldn't have and would probably cause an existential crisis.
Oh, damn.
Hell of a review. I want that on the back of the DVD case.
Yeah, I don't need that in my life, though.
Yeah. But just remember, it's fictional,
Yeah.
but it explores those themes. But with that, this has been episode 200 of Red Web.
Oh, wow.
I'm so grateful. It's already over.
Okay.
I'm so great. What a hard pivot, right? I'm just so grateful that we continue to get to explore these mysteries, these ideas, that the group of us get to hang out and keep doing this together. It's such a fun part of my week. And to close out, let me just say, share the podcast with at least 10 friends or family members, and if you don't,
Yeah, if you don't, just bad luck.
yeah, bad luck.
Bad luck.
You might get, sleep paralysis and see the Hat Man.
You might. Also, don't step on a crack. It might break your mama's back.
Or do, because it might put it right back.
It could crack in the right place, apparently.
In, out. And your mom's just somewhere going, Oh, man. Well, again, if you want to support us, there are a bunch of ways to do it. And I want to go ahead and say some of the free ways to do it because I've talked about Patreon. I've talked about the store. One of the best ways to support us algorithmically, speaking about that AI, speaking about Roko's Basilisk, if you want to review us, give us 5 stars, whether it be on Spotify, Apple, or any of the other podcast playlists out there. It is a huge way to boost us in that algorithm, allow us to find new audience members, and continue growing the show, which keeps us thriving, keeps us present, keeps us here, and keeps those lights on,
Yeah, it does. Thank you so much. Like I said, we're independent now, so everything that you guys do counts, whether it's, like Trevor said, sharing or, getting something like merch or supporting us on Patreon. It is all completely in your guys' hands.
It's in those big hands.
Those very big, soft, leathered, capable hands.
Leather? Wait, soft and leather. Wow, I'm impressed.
Sorry, I meant lathered, but yeah. Leather.
Sign up now. Sign up now. Get yourself that extra square footage. It is the one.
I've got leather hands.
And on that bombshell, thank you, Task Force, for 200 amazing weeks of mysteries, exploring the unknown. We couldn't, seriously, and I mean it sincerely, we couldn't do it without you. And with that said, Fredo, I'll see you right back here next week for another mystery. But
seriously, go out there and catch something tangible for us. That'd be fantastic. Just 200 weeks, it's like at some point, Task Force, we got to produce a product here. We got to produce something that we could show the world. Okay, bye.